One reason why I never looked for a job in a white firm is because of a conversation I had with William T. Coleman, who told me that he was interviewed by a law firm in New York City. And they told him they were willing to give him a job in their law office. But there was an important condition. He asked them, what is the condition? And they told him, you cannot come in contact with our clients. So I told Bill Coleman, that's a hell of a way to practice law. Practice law so you don't come in contact with clients.
When I was being considered for the Sixth Circuit, I was really concerned about it because I was chief judge of the Eastern District of Michigan here, and the first black chief judge here in the Eastern District of Michigan. And the lawyers, the black lawyers, and a lot of the white lawyers were saying, well, Damon, we need you here in Detroit as the chief judge of the court here, because at that time, the chief judge had a lot of authority in terms of selecting and appointing people to the probation department. And I appointed the first black probation director here in Detroit. And so I got a call one day, and it's from Thurgood. He says, Damon, I hear you are pondering whether you should go to the Court of Appeals. Are you losing your mind? I said, what do you mean, Thurgood? He says, if they ask you to go there, you go there. Don't you dare just spend your time there in the Eastern District of Michigan as chief judge. I want you on the Court of Appeals. You can do some good there too.
I remember Mordecai Johnson coming to the law school, and he talked about Mahatma Gandhi. And he said, when Mahatma Gandhi died, who was a lawyer, all of his possessions could be put on top of his briefcase. Well, that's not quite what I think my class wanted to hear, but I've never forgotten it. And I remember Thurgood Marshall coming to our law school, where he was a graduate, obviously, and with tears in his eyes, he said, this is Charlie Houston's law school. Charlie Houston was his dean. And can you imagine, between the Montgomery Boyce boycott and the sit-ins of '60, you were hearing that from Thurgood Marshall.
Hasty, as I learned many years later, had said, you know, Thurgood, you need to hire that boy. He would be a good person. So that's how, had I taken low and said, yes, and I'll give up my membership and stuff like that, I would have been writing these little form letters and been very unhappy about it. But again, by doing what you think is right, which was not to accept that, I got another experience working at the NACP in Pittsburgh, and then Thurgood coming through with the story that Bill Hasty had told him, and getting me into really exciting work that I probably wouldn't have gotten into without that.
There was this very quiet and respectful, but absolutely powerful professor at Harvard that I met that made everything different, and that was Derrick Bell. The light bulbs came on when I met Derrick, because he was doing not the work that I wanted to do, but focus on the issues about race and racism in American law. And boy, how important it was to see a black man say these things are important. You can't become a lawyer and try to understand the Constitution if you don't understand race. So he validated all the things I've been thinking about. And for me, that was the defining moment, that if you're going to be a lawyer, you have to not be paranoid, but aware of how all these other issues that are important to you are also important in the context of law. We didn't talk about race in torts. We didn't talk about race in criminal law. We didn't talk about race in property. We didn't talk about race in contracts. We didn't talk about race in civil procedure. But they were relevant to every single one of those topics that I'd taken in the first year. And Derrick Bell just opened up my mind to the possibilities of race and the necessity of seeing how the legal system works in the context of race.
You know, I think that the civil rights movement probably had the biggest influence on my life, the participants in that. Not just Dr. King or Malcolm X, but Bob Moses and Fannie Lou Hamer and Rosa Parks and E.J. Nixon and all the characters that made up that process, I think are the folks who ended up having the biggest impact on my life. Their stories tell me what ordinary people can do in extraordinary times.
But I was volunteering at the local NAACP after the sit-in movement, and I sat in at the City Hall. And I didn't go back to the City Hall from 1960 until I went back when the Democratic Convention was in Atlanta, and Andy Young was the mayor of the city. And it showed you again how much change was possible. But that got me volunteering for the NAACP and seeing how many poor people, black people, were filing complaints, couldn't get lawyers because white lawyers didn't take civil rights cases, and if they didn't have the money to pay, they couldn't get a lawyer, and that made me wonder what in the world I was thinking about going back abroad or trying to go into the Foreign Service. So the sit-in movement and the civil rights movement and the formation of SNCC in 1960 all were the determining factors in the next stage of my life, which has led to my work now.
In the back of my mind, I always wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. But when I was a senior in college, a senior in high school, my most important focus was that I had to go to Harvard because I had to vindicate my father's experience of not being able to finish.
I remember Lani and I and others participated in a criminal case that was tried in Selma, Alabama, within sight of the Edmund Pettus Bridge in the federal courthouse there. We had quite an experience defending that case. We had some local counsel, some of whom were just incredibly colorful and interesting. We spent weeks and weeks on dirt roads in Perry County trying to find witnesses and trying to make them comfortable with telling us their stories and preparing our defense in the wake of what felt at the time like very much a hostile U.S. attorney and a hostile judge. We tried that case for about 3 weeks' time. We got a not guilty verdict on all counts, and when the jury announced their verdict, the courtroom was absolutely packed with people from the community who had found their voice in the course of this defense, and people just burst into song. And the judge kept trying to get order, and they were just singing hymns at that. I'll never forget it. It took me 3 years of law school in Boskey to realize that, you know what, we have never, ever, ever made an unequivocal, concerted, and principled commitment to racial justice in the law, despite pronouncements by our highest court. And here we are nearly 50 years after Brown, and as remarkable as it seems, and as important as Brown is and necessary, my sense then was, my God, we have not even had a chance to start to address 240 years of slavery in this country, and we're cutting back with the first efforts to promote civil rights and racial justice.
And we find ourselves, historically in my lifetime, over and over again, being in a position of having to start from scratch. We can't build on generation to generation, and in my lifetime, there are generations that are worse off than their forebears. We've never had that experience in America before. So that in a real sense, we have not learned from our history, and we have not learned to take advantage of our successes, so that as a practical matter, we need to begin to build foundations that our children and our children's children can build upon.
Change in our society is happening at, the speed of the internet. African Americans are falling further behind faster. If we do not somehow bridge the digital divide, soon it will become so wide that we'll never be able to bridge it. There will be the haves and the have-nots in a real sense. And it's all driven by technology, access to technology, understanding of technology, ability to leverage and manage technology. And that's really where there's unlimited opportunity for not just African-American entrepreneurs, but also majority and other entrepreneurs. I mean, that's the real crisis facing our society, is that, you know, we've gone from a society dominated by the middle class to a society where you have the upper class and the lower class. And unfortunately, you'll see most African Americans falling into the lower class. And that's the challenge. And therein lies the opportunity as we go forward.
This whole matter of how we develop a nation of people who are going to find it not only possible, but absolutely necessary to live together as not necessarily brothers and sisters, but live together as neighbors who will understand and tolerate and build on the energy of each other.
What I'd like to be able to say is that at the end of my career, my involvement in public service advanced opportunity for the African American community in a significant way.
If only a few of us were getting through, if only a few of us were getting over the horizon, and we weren't letting the ladder back down or letting the rope over to bring somebody else, that our modest success were ultimately a sign of our community's failure. And it was that sense that we had not done enough. Being successful on our own was not nearly enough. Achieving the highest levels of accomplishment was not nearly enough to transform America's sense about race. So that to me has been sort of a lifelong challenge. I'm going to become a lawyer, and I'm going to try to use these tools to do something that's absolutely fundamental and essential to the progress of people of African descent. I can do no less. That's the challenge that Harvard Law School degree posed on me, and that's the challenge that I embraced when I stood there in June 1978 saying, okay, now you're a lawyer. It's time to do something.